Hello, my name is Austin, and this is Go Access, a YouTube channel dedicated to access in higher education and disability rights. Today, I'm going to be covering a journal article because it's Thursday, and the article I have found is entitled Autism and the University Experience Narratives from Students with Neurodevelopmental Disorders. The article was written by Jasmine Bolerian, Sasha M. Zedek, and Jan Blatcher. Hopefully, I got those pronunciations correctly. The article used their study was interviewing students on the autism spectrum and with attention deficit hyperactive disorder. They interviewed 13 students on the spectrum, 18 students with ADHD. They used 45-minute interviews that were semi-structured and then coded for key themes. And the ASD students were mostly male, and the ADHD students were mostly female. So some of the key themes from the interviews was influences prior to university, academic expectations, disclosure of diagnosis, self-awareness in the present, comorbid conditions, opinions on medication use, peer interactions, living and housing arrangements, anticipation of the future. I'm going to cover the majority of those themes and talk about different quotes that I found and information from the article that I thought was interesting. So starting with that first theme of influences prior to university, basically students on the spectrum had more positive experiences before university than students with ADHD, which was kind of interesting. I think a lot of that is because of the parent support. For example, a student on the spectrum said my Asperger's diagnosis when I was 14, and they actually did a lot of work to help me succeed. So I think that's obviously a positive experience. While with ADHD, they talked about being denied opportunities and having kind of taking some blame for some of the behavioral issues associated with ADHD, which was unfortunate. So those are kind of how their experiences differed prior to university. Academic expectations. Students expressed feeling that they needed to prove themselves and were getting less academic opportunities. So everyone kind of from who was either on the spectrum or had ADHD felt that they were being limited from their academic opportunities and really needed to prove themselves in college. I like the quote, I want to be able to know that I can keep up with everyone else. I think that's a common feeling when you come to college with some type of disability. I have mild cerebral palsy, and when I went to college, I kind of felt like that too, that I wanted to prove that I was able to keep up with everyone else and succeed. Disclosure of diagnosis. Students expressed feeling that revealing their disability would change how people viewed them, but revealing was positive for most students. So looking at the quotes, you can see one of them says, they'll start asking me why I need this accommodation. I know that's not allowed, but they question me. I actually have to convince them why I need it. So I think that was in reference to a faculty member when they disclose their disability of some of the questions that get asked. And I think it's important for faculty and peers in the classroom, other students, to be aware that you really, if someone discloses their disability, it's not right to start questioning why they have certain accommodations and stuff. That's not anyone's business, and that they've had to provide medical documentation in order to get those accommodations, so they should be respected. Now looking at self-awareness in the present. Students expressed noticing how different they were from their peers and noticing how their symptoms could negatively impact them academically. So one of the students with ADHD said, I really get distracted during tests, especially when I'm anxious or when I'm nervous. And I think it's important for students to kind of notice how their symptoms impact them negatively and being aware, particularly from an academic perspective. I know for myself, I know that I take longer for tests. I also have ADHD, and sometimes I can be more distracted and jump around. So I will do things like start working on an assignment earlier, make sure that I am budgeting extra time for the assignment, those type of things where the more you have experience, particularly even negative experience being affected academically from your disability, the more likely you are to make changes to help yourself be more prepared. So I could see a student who gets nervous before a test, maybe doing some mindfulness meditation before each exam to try and feel a little bit more relaxed for the actual test. Opinions about medical use. So in this case, I'm just going to read a block quote here. A professor in science class said you don't take medication, right? And I didn't want her to think of me any different, so I'm like, yeah, I don't. And she's like, that's good. You don't need it. It's so bad for you. You can learn how to deal with your problem without using it. And then later the student says, if the people don't realize you don't take it for the abuse of it, you take it to be normal. And I think that's something that's, again, pointing out how faculty can sometimes pry into students' personal business a little bit too much as far as pertaining to the disability and what methods they're using to help cope with the symptoms of that disability. The faculty member should check their opinion on that at the door. It's sort of like talking to a student about politics or financial advice. There's things where you're trying to kind of keep those things a little bit more close to the chest and be respectful of different opinions and views and not judge. And I think that sometimes faculty with things like medication, can pass judgment and make a student with a disability feel uncomfortable sometimes. Peer interactions. Students expressed having difficulty making friends and trying to talk to students in the classroom. Both students with ADHD and ASD use clubs and student groups to meet people. So I think that's really an interesting subject to be studying coming out of the interviews because a lot of students who are neurodiverse can have a hard time interacting with peers and reading their body language and facial expressions to know if it's going well or if it's not going well. And I think that is kind of interesting, particularly for students on the autism spectrum. Peer interactions, I think, plays a big role, and I think that's why students on the autism spectrum are more likely to use clubs to meet people and kind of almost religiously attend clubs sometimes and not have the same social supports outside of their clubs because it's difficult for them to make those connections. And I really like the first quote. There's that line of how much do you try without being too aggressive and forward, because a big issue for students on the spectrum is stalking and asking too much and how many times is the line. And I think that's something that could be explored as well in future research of trying to see how you can help educate students on the spectrum about those type of things. So the article finding found that students on the autism spectrum rarely discuss topics related to medication use and experiences prior to university, while students with ADHD rarely discuss negative peer interactions. So I think that kind of reflects how students with ADHD are more likely to be using medication, while students on like the autism spectrum are more likely to have difficulty with peer interactions. So I think that's probably why that discrepancy is there. The vast majority of the students were registered with the College Disability Office but felt nervous about talking to their professors about their disability. I think that's something where colleges and universities should really be working toward, is to educate faculty and have a set script and plan in place to help make students feel comfortable talking with faculty about their disability and about their accommodations, and really educating faculty not to question students too much about personal things pertaining to their disability, like medication, or asking just in general too many personal questions about their disability, and really coming from a place of support and trying to maximize whatever the student's strengths are. The researchers felt students would benefit from career counseling and interpersonal social skills for graduate programs. I think those are definitely good things that students would benefit from. I know a lot of the graduate programs obviously have career counseling. I don't know so much about the interpersonal social skills, but I think that if they could find someone or an intervention for that, that would probably be very beneficial. So I really enjoyed this article. I hope you enjoyed my summary, and please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.